Studios, they've been backers of ours for years also. It's great to see those guys. It's a Calgary-based digital agency, can help you with supercharge your business or your marketing strategy, elevate your personal brand, and help you grow your business. You can learn more at mindshiftstudios.com. And I just had a great chat with their boss. They're doing interesting things, even in El Salvador, that freedom-oriented country. It's fun to hear about. You probably saw our friends at the JCCF, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. For more than 10 years, they've been Canada's leading civil liberties public interest law firm. And we've been sort of allies of theirs and vice versa for years. So they have a booth outside. Another one of our amazing sponsors is Inheritance Publications. They're selling a bunch of historical books geared towards kids. You can pop by and pick up a few books, or you can find them on their website, which is too complicated for me to read. Chaz from Happy Belly Kombucha is also here, and he was kind enough to supply the drinks at lunch. And I don't know if you tried those, were excellent kombucha. Those are excellent. And I love the drink because they taste as good as the soft drink, but they're way healthier. So, it takes a lot to make my belly happy, but Happy Belly Kombucha did the job. Last but not least, we want to give a big thank you to Cultivate Wellness, who are hosting their Unleashed event in Vermilion on October 26th and 27th. The event will leave you with a renewed sense of self-trust, self-sustainability, inner power, and the tools to foster spiritual growth. Learn more at cultivatenow.ca. And of course, if you want to support us directly, we've got some fun t-shirts and books out there too, including a special Rebel News edition of Orwell's classic 1984. I don't know if you saw that then. We laid out the original first edition, again in a bigger, easier to read type, and we commissioned 30 original pieces of artwork. So it's not one letter, not one word is different from the original 1984. It's just laid out beautifully with 30 illustrations and a little forward by me. So I love the fact that we're republishing 1984. We can get that aside. All right, thank you to our sponsors who've really helped us out today and over the years. When the trucker convoy started making its way to Ottawa, I knew something special was afoot, and Rebel News, that was our time to shine. We didn't know it, but we had been preparing for that moment for years. We had been preparing sometimes against our will, when we were demonetized by YouTube and banned and marginalized, and they tried to cancel us. All those things were teaching us how to operate as contrarians and indeed dissidents. Our citizen journalism style was exactly what filled the void when the regime media decided to run with Trudeau's narrative that these were actually a Canadian echo of the January 6th insurrectionists. They tried so hard to paint the truckers as wild-eyed and violent and un-Canadian. That didn't work though, because I've never seen more Canadian flags in my life. People were spontaneously singing the Canadian anthem. It's tough to be scared of people in bouncy castles and hot tubs. And it was actually the most peaceful mass protest in Canadian history. As you know, the crime rate went down in downtown Ottawa during the pandemic. It foiled Justin Trudeau, and it did something that he could never abide, which is it embarrassed him. That was the real crisis and emergency that caused him to invoke the Emergencies Act. There was no emergency other than he was embarrassed. They're still trying to rehabilitate themselves, the Liberals, I mean. They're having a tough go of it. The federal court ruled that was an illegal and unconstitutional invocation of martial law, and they specifically had harsh words for the way Chrystia Freeland seized and froze bank accounts without any due care, with just willy-nilly and a tyrannical approach. It's actually quite an astounding ruling, and it's in fairly readable plain English. If you haven't yet read Justice Mosley's federal court ruling, I recommend it to you. And he starts off, the judge, by saying he was really sympathetic to the government and hostile to the truckers, but by the time he was done his ruling, he ruled against the Emergencies Act. And so what has Trudeau done? He's plummeted in the polls, and it really started during the lockdowns. You can really trace the poll graphs from February of 2022. He was humiliated in the federal court. His justice minister, who approved the Emergencies Act, quit in disgrace and slinked off. That's David Lametti. But there's one last desperate move that the government, that the establishment has done to try and vindicate and validate their approach and to try to demonize the truckers. And that is the most abusive sham trial, show trial, I should say, of the moral leader of the truckers, Tamara Lich. The longest running mischief trial, not just in Canadian history, but anywhere in the Commonwealth. There is no such thing as a 47 days of hearings over more than a year for a mischief trial. A mischief trial is the kind of thing there, a kid is caught spray painting graffiti, he comes in, the judge shakes it. It's the lowest crime in the criminal code. It's the kind of thing that takes at most a day and rarely involves any incarceration or even a sentence at all. But they have taken this and turned the process into the punishment. Let me give you a quick anecdote, because I'm running a little bit late. I was in the trial in Ottawa near the end, and 5 quick video clips of Tamara Lich were shown to the court. And it was like she was just in the background, just chatting. There was no purpose to it. And I guess I was sort of, starting to daydream. That trial is so abusively long. I wasn't as sharp as I should have been. So I was watching these 5 short clips, some were just a few seconds long. Tamara Lich chatting with this guy, saying, hey, hold the line with that guy. 5 clips, in total maybe like 3 minutes. And that was it. And I thought, why are they showing this? What's the point of this? I don't even see a point here. Those 5 clips were the totality of the evidence of what Tamara Lich did from the moment she arrived in Ottawa to the moment she was arrested. They didn't have a single other piece of evidence. Not one witness spoke to her, interacted with her, dealt with her, observed her. They had dozens of witnesses, but none of them actually saw anything that Tamara Lich did. Those 5 tiny clips where she was in the background, I don't know how they even spotted her. Maybe they used facial recognition, but that's it. There is no way that this met the legal test for a prosecution. Number 1, is it in the public interest? And number 2, is there a reasonable prospect of conviction? So why did they put her through this onerous process? Vengeance, punishment, knock her down, perhaps turn her sour, didn't work. This is Trudeau's last gasp, his attempt to criminalize retroactively the entire trucker convoy when in fact it was his lockdown that was breaking the law. And what luck our country has that the person who found herself as the Joan of Arc, the spiritual leader, if you will, of the trucker convoy happened to be someone who was so peaceful and positive and even spiritual, I dare say. What luck that the person Trudeau chose to aim the full weight of the government on did not break. And even though she was incarcerated for 49 days, much of it in isolation due to COVID, she came out of jail not bitter, but more proudly Canadian than ever. We are very lucky as a country that she was where she was, when she was. And I think it's a case of some people are born great, some people have greatness thrust upon them. I have the pleasure of introducing you to my friend who is truly a great Canadian, to whom we all owe a debt, my friend Tamara Lich.
We started off this conversation talking about the freedom, but our freedom's going to be secure right now. What a time, eh? How are you guys? Thank you so much. I was just having a bit of a laugh. I swore I wasn't going to shed any tears today, and I think I've cried like 5 times already. It's kind of become my thing. Thank you. Thank you to all of you who came out today, and I have to definitely thank Rebel News and all the Rebels, as Relevant, of course, who I can say has done more to help me than anybody else, and I really appreciate that, Ezra. We were having a bit of a conversation the other day, and never in a million years did I think that I would be able to compare myself to somebody. I see Ezra getting attacked all the time and criticized, and I think Chris and I face, a lot of the same things. Anyways, it was just funny because I walked in my house yesterday morning or the morning before, and I put my phone down and I looked at my daughter and I said, "Isn't this a crazy life? Like, I just got off the phone having a chat with Ezra Levant." It has been just a crazy ride. I know I was here last year for this event, and never in a million years did I still think a year later that we would still be in the middle of this trial. Well, I shouldn't say the middle. We're getting close to the end now, but what a strange time to be alive. And the only thing I can equate it to is, like Ezra was saying, is punishment. And they want to make sure that none of you ever get such an idea in your head either. And so, this is the painting that they did. Wow. And I like looking at that picture actually because I'm smiling. And I can tell you, when that happened, of course I was a bit anxious. I've never been arrested before. I've never been to jail before. But I had the thought in my head that, look, I'm not intimidating, which, one of my charges is intimidation, which I get quite a kick out of. But, I just thought this is not a reflection on me. It is a reflection on them. And, of course, so even when I was in jail, I just thought, God, you've helped us expose so much already, and you're obviously not done with me yet, and thy will, not my will. And that's how the longest mischief trial of all time. And I was talking with one of the rebels the other day, because I talked to Chris Barber. Now, Chris and I had no contact order with each other. We weren't allowed to speak to each other unless we were in the presence of counsel. We had to actually take this to the judge. We did ask the Crown Prosecutor nicely if he would consider dropping this after all the evidentiary portion of our trial was done, and he said no. And so we took it to the judge, and she agreed with us. And so I checked with the Rebel. I invited Chris to come on stage with me to speak today. It's the first time that we've been able to come and do an event like Rebel News together. And I just think, he is definitely my best friend. 3 years ago, I didn't even know this man's name. I picked up the phone one day and introduced myself. And I said, my name's Tamara. I said, my background is logistics, organization, and administration. You guys are going to need money, you're going to need some social media, and you're going to need a little bit of help, and how can I help you? And the gentleman that I talked to on the phone was bright, funny, obviously loved his country, and I couldn't be more proud to be going through what we are going through together with anybody else. So if Chris could come on up here, please. Please give him a warm welcome. Chris Barber. He's the most awkward man to hug, and you're 5 feet tall, I'm going to tell you that. Yeah, it's just been that. I mean, like I said, 3 years ago, we didn't even know each other, right?
It was literally the best phone call I ever answered throughout that time. It was a very busy time. You went from being just a social media personality in the province, driving a truck and hauling equipment, to then being on essentially the world stage. And that phone call that I got, I remember writing your name down. I still have that book. It said Tamara, and then the phone number. And then history was born from there, and a friendship was born from there, and I can't be more thankful.
We had the best time driving across Canada, actually. We often joke because we were both so busy. I mean, I remember at one point, Chris's, got Tucker Carlson's people on hold because he's talking to Sean Hannity, and we're just like, what is going on here? Do you want to talk about the convoy first? Do you want to talk about the trial? Where do you want to start?
Let's start with the convoy first, I guess. There was a night we were driving on the highway. I want everybody to keep in mind that we shared the cab of the truck with my 18-year-old son at the time, Jonathan, and the little dog Zippy. So the four of us, 3,000 kilometers with up to 30 kilometers, miles of traffic behind us. It was an intense experience. We did 3,000 kilometers in what was it, 4 days? 5 days?
Yeah, it was crazy. And it was so cold. And this was just the most amazing thing. We have to talk about Manitoba because all of it was absolutely amazing. And I know I've said this before, but as we were getting closer to the Manitoba border, I remember Chris and I having a conversation about thinking, we were fully expecting the farther east we went that all these people were going to start to disappear and we were not going to have that type of support. And then we pulled into Headingley, Manitoba. And it was extremely emotional and we were completely blown away. We were talking like from Headingley into Winnipeg, all around the perimeter and out all the way past, I think, the Steinbach. Yeah, I mean, people, the support was overwhelming and it didn't stop, even when we got into Ontario.
5 different Hutterite colonies came together in the southern side of Manitoba, came down to feed us at the Flying J truck stop in Headingley, Manitoba. There were so many people there, we couldn't get into the parking lot. So the police actually had to say, this is a safety concern, we have to ask you not to stop. And so we listened to law enforcement the entire time across the country. And those Hutterite colonies drove to Kenora, Ontario that night to feed us in the parking lot there, in the bitter cold, in the recreational parking lot. It was about minus 25 to 30. Your fingers were frozen just holding the hot sandwiches. And then they went home yet that night, so.
And there's just one more sign of how Canadians just came together, and that's what made it so beautiful. This wasn't the Tamara Lich convoy, this wasn't the Chris Barber convoy, this was the Canadian convoy. These truckers started it based on the mandate, the travel mandate, cross-border mandate at the time. But what it turned into was a full-blown Canadian movement. If it wasn't for the generosity of Canadians that came or fed us along the way, I mean, it would have never have been the success that it was, and it was a success, in my opinion, even though all of the stuff that we're going through. But I remember we were still on the way to Ottawa, and of course those guys were talking on their CB radios all the time, and Chris was talking to somebody, I can't remember who,